I was 16 when my English teacher laughed at my dreams. I'm 21 now, and last week I signed his rejection letter. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is just becoming exactly who they said you'd never be. Welcome to the last lesson. If you're new here, subscribe for stories about resilience, redemption, and the quiet power of proving people wrong. This one changed everything for me. I need you to understand something before we begin. I wasn't always this calm. I wasn't always this sure of myself. There was a time when a single laugh could shatter me into 1,000 pieces, when someone else's opinion felt more real than my own heartbeat. I was 16 years old, and I believed in teachers the way some people believe in God. His name was Mr. Harrison. Michael Harrison. He taught junior English at Riverside High, and if you asked anyone in that building who the best teacher was, his name would come up first. Every single time. He had this way of leaning against his desk, coffee cup in hand, talking about The Great Gatsby like he personally knew Jay and Daisy. He made Shakespeare sound like rap lyrics. He made us laugh during grammar lessons, which should be illegal, honestly. Everyone wanted to be in his class. Everyone wanted him to notice them, including me. I was the quiet girl. You know the type. Always sitting by the window, notebook open, pen moving even when we were supposed to be listening to lectures. I didn't mean to be rude. I had stories living in my head, and if I didn't write them down immediately, they'd evaporate like morning fog. My notebooks weren't the kind you buy for school. I'm talking about those thick, leather-bound journals from the bookstore downtown, the ones that smell like possibility and cost half my babysitting money. I filled them with everything. Short stories about girls who found magic in library books. Essays about what it felt like to be invisible in a crowded hallway. Poems that didn't rhyme because I thought breaking rules made them more honest. I wrote during lunch while other kids socialized. I wrote on the bus while everyone else scrolled through their phones. I wrote at 2 a.m. when insomnia and inspiration collided. Writing wasn't a hobby for me. It was breathing. And Mr. Harrison seemed like someone who would understand that. He'd sometimes walk around during silent reading time, glancing at what we were working on. One Tuesday in October, he paused at my desk. I was revising a short story about a lighthouse keeper who collected other people's secrets in glass bottles. You write a lot, he said. Not a question. An observation. My heart jumped. Yes, sir. Creative writing. Stories, mostly. Sometimes poetry. He nodded slowly. That thoughtful expression teachers get when they're pretending to be impressed. That's great. Keep it up. We need more readers in the world. Readers, not writers. I noticed, but I brushed it off. Over the next few weeks, I started staying after class sometimes. Not every day. I didn't want to be annoying. But occasionally, when everyone else rushed out to lunch or their next period, I'd linger by his desk with a question about an assignment or a comment about whatever book we were reading. He was always nice, always encouraging in that vague, teacher-y way. Good job on your essay. Interesting interpretation. You have a strong vocabulary. But there was something I couldn't quite name. A distance. Like he was coaching me through a sport he didn't actually believe I could win. The red flag I should have seen. He gave real attention to other students. Marcus, who wanted to be a lawyer. Mr. Harrison brought in articles about Supreme Court cases for him. Sienna, who dreamed of medical school. He helped her prepare for an essay contest about healthcare innovation. He invested in the students whose dreams looked like paychecks, whose ambitions fit neatly onto college applications. But me? I got compliments without commitment, praise without presence. Still, I convinced myself that was enough. Then came the day I decided to tell him the truth. It was late November. The classroom smelled like old paper and the pumpkin spice candle he kept on his desk, even though it was technically a fire hazard. Most students had already left. I'd stayed back, gathering courage like loose change. Mr. Harrison? My voice sounded smaller than I wanted it to. Can I talk to you for a second? He looked up from his laptop, adjusting his glasses. Sure. What's up? I sat down at the desk, closest to him. My hands were shaking, so I gripped my notebook tighter. I wanted to tell you something. About my future plans. Okay. He smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes but looks good enough from a distance. I want to be a writer. The words came out in a rush, not like as a hobby or whatever, as a career. I want to write books, articles, maybe work for a magazine or a publishing house. I know it's hard and I know most people don't make it, but I think I could. I know I could. I wanted to tell someone who might understand. The silence that followed felt like falling. He leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and then he laughed. Not a polite chuckle, not a nervous giggle, a real laugh, the kind that echoes off walls and settles into your bones like a bruise. Writing. He said the word like it was cute. Like I just told him I wanted to be a unicorn. That's not a career, sweetheart. That's a hobby for people with trust funds. I felt my face burn. I'm serious. I'm sure you are. He was still smiling, but it wasn't kind anymore. Look, you're a talented kid. You write well for your age. But the industry is brutal. The chances of making a living as a writer? Practically zero. You'd be better off choosing something stable. Teaching, maybe. Marketing. Something with actual job security. But trust me on this. He turned back to his laptop. I've seen 100 students with the same dream. Know how many made it? None. Choose something real. I sat there for a moment, frozen. Behind me, I heard footsteps. A few students had come back for something they'd forgotten. They'd heard everything. I could feel their eyes on my back, could sense their secondhand embarrassment mixing with my own humiliation. One of them whispered something. Another laughed quietly. I stood up, picked up my notebook, walked out of that classroom with my head down and my dreams suddenly feeling like delusions. I didn't cry. Not then. But that night, alone in my room, I stared at my journal stacked on my desk and wondered if he was right. Maybe I was just a girl with pretty handwriting and unrealistic fantasies. Maybe I should choose something real. I sat there for hours, my laptop open to a blank document, cursor blinking like a heartbeat. And then I started typing. Not because I believed anymore, but because I didn't know how to stop. What I didn't know then was that humiliation, the kind that burns clean through you, can become something else entirely. Something sharper. Something useful. Something else entirely. Something sharper. Something useful. But that lesson was still years away. Next time, I'll tell you what happened when those years finally passed. I want to tell you about the years between 16 and 21. Not because they were easy. Not because I had some magical transformation montage where everything suddenly clicked into place. But because those years were where I learned that spite, when properly channeled, can be the most powerful fuel in the world. After that day in Mr. Harrison's classroom, something inside me hardened. Not in a cold way, in a decisive way. Like water turning to ice. Still the same substance, just stronger. More capable of bearing weight. I stopped talking about my dreams. That's the first thing that changed. Before, I'd tell anyone who asked what I wanted to be. A writer, I'd say, with that bright-eyed enthusiasm that makes adults smile condescendingly and pat your head. After Mr. Harrison's laugh echoed through my skull for the 1,000th time, I learned to say other things. Oh, I'm not sure yet. Maybe something in communications. Still figuring it out. I became a ghost of my own ambition in public. But in private? In private, I became obsessive. Senior year was a blur of applications and essays and pretending I cared about prom when all I really cared about was getting out. Getting away. Getting to a place where nobody knew me as the girl whose teacher laughed at her dreams. I got into a decent state university. Not Ivy League. We couldn't afford that, and my grades were good, but not scholarship level spectacular. But it had a solid journalism program, and that felt close enough to writing without triggering anyone's concern about my future employment prospects. My parents were relieved I'd chosen something practical. I didn't correct them. College was where I learned how to work. Not the kind of work you do for grades or approval, but the kind that hollows you out and rebuilds you stronger. I took 18 credit hours a semester. I joined the campus newspaper and clawed my way from fact checker to features writer by the end of freshman year. I submitted to every writing contest I could find, collected rejection letters like battle scars, and kept submitting anyway. And I worked. God, I worked. 3 jobs by sophomore year. Barista at the campus coffee shop from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. classes, until 3 p.m. freelance writing gigs in the evenings. Terrible pay. Boring topics, but they were bylines. My name in actual publications, even if those publications were obscure wellness blogs and local business websites. Weekends, I tutored high school students in English. The irony wasn't lost on me. My roommate thought I was insane. "You're going to burn out," she'd say, watching me type furiously at 2 a.m., my third Red Bull of the night sweating condensation onto my desk. Maybe I was burning, but I wasn't burning out. I was burning through doubt, through fear, through the echo of that laugh that still lived in my chest like a splinter I couldn't remove. Every time I got a rejection email, and there were dozens, then hundreds, I'd hear his voice. "That's not a career, sweetheart." Every time I struggled to string sentences together at 1 a.m. after a double shift, when my eyes burned and my brain felt like static, I'd hear it again. "Choose something real." And every single time, I'd think, "Watch me." Not out loud. Never out loud. That was my secret weapon, silence. While other aspiring writers posted about their dreams on social media, hashtagged their journals, announced their novel attempts to anyone who'd listen, I stayed quiet. I just worked. By junior year, something shifted. My freelance clips were getting better. The publications were getting bigger. I landed an article in a regional magazine about the coffee shop culture in college towns. They paid me $300, which felt like winning the lottery. Then another piece. Then another. I started getting emails from editors who'd seen my work. Small assignments at first, then bigger ones. A think piece about Generation Z and nostalgia. An interview with a local author. A personal essay about working multiple jobs while pursuing creative dreams that went semi-viral on Medium. That essay was the turning point, though I didn't know it yet. I'd written it at 4 a.m. after a particularly brutal shift at the coffee shop, where a customer had yelled at me for 5 minutes about foam consistency. I was exhausted, angry, and suddenly the words just poured out. About being young and broke and ambitious. About teachers who crushed dreams instead of nurturing them. About proving people wrong one byline at a time. I didn't name Mr. Harrison. I didn't name anyone. But I wrote about that laugh. The way it felt like a door slamming in my face. The essay got 12,000 shares in 3 days. My inbox exploded. Other writers sending solidarity. Editors reaching out about assignments. And buried in there, one email that changed everything. Subject: "Loved your essay, let's talk." It was from Marcus Chun, the creative director at Apex Digital Media, a growing content company based 2 hours from campus. He wanted to know if I'd be interested in an internship that summer. I replied in 30 seconds. The internship was unpaid, which meant adding a 4th job to my roster just to afford rent for the summer. But it was real. A real media company with real writers producing content that real people actually read. I worked harder than I'd ever worked in my life, and by the end of August, Marcus offered me a part-time position as a junior content writer. I was 20 years old. By the time senior year started, I was barely on campus. I'd take morning classes, then drive to Apex for afternoon shifts, then come home and work on freelance pieces until I couldn't see straight. My grades slipped from A's to B's, but my portfolio exploded. My bylines were appearing in places I'd only dreamed about as a 16-year-old with a leather notebook. After graduation, Apex offered me a full-time position. $35,000 a year. Not much, but enough to finally quit the coffee shop, enough to get a studio apartment with a desk by the window, enough to feel like I was actually doing it. I was a writer, with a salary, with benefits. That's not a career, sweetheart. Guess again. The year I turned 21, everything accelerated. Marcus got promoted to VP of Content, and I was promoted to Content Strategist. 6 months later, when our creative director left for another company, Marcus called me into his office. "I'm recommending you for the position," he said simply. "You've earned it. Creative director." At 21. Overseeing a team of 12 writers and editors, managing content strategy for clients with actual marketing budgets, approving pitches, and shaping campaigns. I was the youngest person in company leadership by 7 years. The imposter syndrome was crushing at first. Every meeting, I'd sit there thinking someone would realize they'd made a mistake, that I was still just that 16-year-old girl who got laughed at in an empty classroom. But then I'd look at my team, writers I was now mentoring, encouraging, helping shape their careers, and I'd remember why I'd worked so hard. Not just to prove Mr. Harrison wrong, but to become the kind of person who actually built other people up instead of tearing them down. I was 3 months into the creative director role when it happened. It was a Tuesday morning. I was reviewing applications for a senior writer position we'd posted, scrolling through resumes, most of them qualified but unremarkable. Then I saw a name that made my coffee go cold. Michael Harrison. I stared at the screen, convinced I was hallucinating. But no, there it was. His name, his email, his carefully curated resume listing 15 years of teaching experience, his master's degree in English literature, his passion for storytelling and mentoring emerging talent. The cover letter was beautifully written, of course. He always did have a way with words. I'm seeking to transition from education to content creation, where I can combine my love of language with modern media strategies. My years in the classroom have taught me the importance of clear communication and nurturing creative voices. I read it 3 times. My hands were shaking, but not with anger, with something else, something colder, clearer. I clicked to his LinkedIn profile. The teaching career had apparently ended 2 years ago. His last post was about exciting new chapters and exploring opportunities beyond traditional education. Translation: something had gone wrong. I sat back in my chair, staring at his application on my screen. 5 years ago, he'd laughed at my dreams in front of other students. Now he was asking me for a job. The universe, I realized, has a sense of humor after all. I could have deleted his application, pretended I never saw it, let someone else make the decision. But I didn't, because sometimes you don't get closure. You have to create it yourself. Next time, I'll tell you exactly what I did with that application. His application sat in my inbox for 3 days. I didn't delete it. I didn't forward it. I just looked at it, over and over again, like a puzzle I was trying to solve. Like if I stared long enough, I'd understand what cosmic joke had delivered Michael Harrison to my desk, seeking employment at a company where I, the girl he dismissed as hopelessly unrealistic, now held the power to determine his future. The irony was so sharp it could draw blood. My team wanted to interview him, of course. On paper, he was qualified. 15 years of experience, a master's degree, strong writing samples attached to his application. My senior editor, Priya, had already flagged him as a top candidate. "This Harrison guy looks solid," she'd said during our hiring meeting. Teaching background could bring an interesting perspective to educational content. Should we bring him in? I'd smiled noncommittally. Let me review his materials more carefully first. That night, I sat in my apartment with a glass of wine I barely touched, reading through everything he'd submitted. His resume was impressive in that polished, desperate way that screams, "I need this to work out." The gaps were subtle, but they were there. A 2-year hole between his last teaching position and now, filled with vague phrases like independent consulting and curriculum development projects. Something had happened, something that ended his teaching career, or at least made him want to run from it. I could have Googled him, found out exactly what went wrong, but I realized I didn't actually care about the details of his professional demise. That wasn't the point. The point was sitting right in front of me, in the form of a decision only I could make. I thought about 16-year-old me, the girl who'd gone home that November day and cried into her pillow, who'd looked at her notebooks and wondered if she should just burn them, the girl who'd heard that laugh echo in her head during every rejection, every setback, every 3 a.m. moment when she questioned whether she had the right to call herself a writer. I thought about what that girl would want me to do now. And here's what I realized. She wouldn't want me to be cruel. She'd want me to be honest. I scheduled the hiring decision meeting for Friday afternoon. My team gathered in the conference room, Priya, Marcus, and 2 other senior editors. We had 3 positions to fill and about 15 serious candidates to discuss. Michael Harrison's application came up third. I reviewed his materials extensively. I said, keeping my voice level and professional. His teaching experience is notable, and his writing samples demonstrate technical skill. Priya nodded enthusiastically. Right? I think he could really strengthen our educational content vertical. Should we schedule an interview? I paused, took a breath. Actually, I'm going to pass on moving him forward. The room went quiet. Marcus tilted his head slightly. Can I ask why? On paper, he seems like a strong fit. On paper, yes, I agreed. But there are some concerns that came up during my research. Nothing disqualifying in a legal sense, just questions about his approach to mentorship and his ability to foster creativity in collaborative environments. It wasn't a lie. It was, in fact, the most truthful assessment I could give. There are other candidates with similar qualifications and fewer question marks, I continued. I think our resources are better spent there. Marcus studied me for a moment. He knew me well enough by now to trust my instincts, even when I didn't explain every detail. All right, your call. You're the one who'll be working with them directly. And just like that, it was decided. Michael Harrison would not be getting an interview. But I wasn't finished yet. Corporate protocol dictated that rejection letters go out through our automated HR system. Generic, impersonal, the kind of email everyone gets when they don't make the cut. But I had the authority to override that system, to send personalized correspondence when I felt it was warranted. And this warranted something personal. I spent 2 hours crafting the letter, writing and rewriting. Not because I wanted it to be cruel, I didn't, but because I wanted every word to be exactly right. Honest, professional, and just pointed enough that he'd feel it, even if he didn't fully understand why. Dear Mr. Harrison, thank you for your interest in the senior writer position at Apex Digital Media. We appreciate the time you invested in your application and the experience you bring from your background in education. After careful review of your qualifications and thoughtful consideration of our team's current needs, we have decided not to move forward with your candidacy at this time. At Apex, we prioritize candidates who demonstrate not only strong technical writing skills, but also a proven commitment to fostering creativity, supporting emerging voices, and creating environments where ambitious ideas can flourish. While your resume reflects significant experience, we're seeking someone whose approach to collaboration and mentorship aligns more closely with our company values. We believe that the most effective content creators are those who remember what it feels like to be underestimated, who understand that unconventional paths often lead to the most innovative work, and who genuinely invest in helping others achieve what others might dismiss as unrealistic. We wish you the best in your job search and hope you find a position that's the right fit for your skills and philosophy. Sincerely, Sarah Mitchell, Creative Director, Apex Digital Media. I read it 15 times before I send it. Then I moved my cursor to the send button and clicked. The email whooshed into the void of the internet, carrying 5 years of silence with it. I sat back in my chair, and for the first time since I'd seen his name in my inbox, I felt something unfold in my chest. Not triumph, exactly. Not even satisfaction. Peace. Just peace. 3 weeks later, I was at my usual coffee shop, not the one I'd worked at during college, but a quieter place near my apartment where I'd go to write on weekends. I was working on something personal for the first time in months, an essay about resilience and the strange mathematics of revenge. I was so absorbed in my laptop that I almost didn't notice when someone sat down at the table next to mine. Almost. I glanced up reflexively, and my entire body went still. Michael Harrison, right there, 10 feet away, ordering a black coffee from the barista, settling into his chair with a newspaper and reading glasses that made him look older than I remembered. He hadn't seen me, or if he had, he didn't recognize me. Why would he? I was just one student among hundreds he'd taught over the years, one forgettable girl with an unrealistic dream. I could have left, should have left probably, but something kept me in my seat, watching him over the top of my laptop screen. He looked tired. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 5 years ago. His shoulders slumped in a way that suggested defeat had become a posture. I wondered if he'd received many rejection letters lately, if mine had been just one among dozens, if he'd even read it carefully enough to catch the subtle implications woven between the professional language. Part of me hoped he had. Part of me hoped every word had landed exactly as intended. But the bigger part of me, the part that had grown up during those 5 years of relentless work and quiet determination, realized something important. I didn't actually need him to understand. I didn't need him to recognize my name on that letter and feel the weight of cosmic irony. I didn't need him to realize that the girl he'd laughed at was now the person who decided he wasn't good enough. I didn't need his regret or his awareness or his apology. Because the revenge I'd imagined at 16, the confrontation, the dramatic reveal, the moment where I'd make him see what he'd done, that revenge belonged to a girl who still believed other people's opinions mattered more than her own. I wasn't that girl anymore. I finished my coffee, closed my laptop, stood up to leave. As I walked past his table, he didn't look up from his newspaper, and I didn't stop walking. Outside, the autumn air was crisp and clean. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing it in, feeling something shift and settle inside me. The truth is, revenge isn't always loud. It's not always a confrontation or a dramatic revelation. Sometimes it's just becoming so completely, undeniably yourself that someone else's doubt becomes irrelevant. Sometimes it's signing your name on a rejection letter with a steady hand. Sometimes it's walking past your ghosts without needing them to recognize you. Sometimes revenge is just living well, working hard, building something real. And sometimes the sweetest victory is realizing you don't need the victory at all anymore. I walked home with my laptop bag over my shoulder, already thinking about the next story I wanted to write, the next writer I wanted to mentor, the next dream I wanted to help someone else build. Because that's the real lesson, isn't it? The best way to prove someone wrong isn't to destroy them. It's to become everything they said you couldn't be, and then use that power to lift up the next person they would have crushed. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated or laughed at or told your dreams weren't realistic, I want you to know something. Keep going. Work in silence. Let your success be the noise. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one. Stories about resilience, redemption, and the quiet power of proving people wrong. Because we're just getting started. I'll see you in the next one.